tip for this week is the duplicate stitch method of weaving in the ends for stockinette. And I've done a number of videos on this, but apparently I haven't done enough because this still seems to be a problem for many knitters and for my students. Now in this swatch that I've knit, notice that I've used very large needles so that it's big and holy. And the reason I've done that is so that the stitches will be easier to see. And I've got a couple of things going on here. I've got this stripe, and I'll tell you what that stripe is there for in a minute. And then I have a section here where I have a mid-row join. And I've done it in two colors so that it'll be a little easier to see. Now, when do you use the duplicate stitch method? Let's say that this is my right side of my work, and I have yarn tails. So this would be the yarn tail that I want to weave in. And this can be very difficult to visualize. We know what stockinette looks like on the right side, but what we're going to be duplicating is the way that stockinette looks on the wrong side. And if I look at this closely, notice that it goes around and down and up. It reminds me of ribbon candy that I used to see when I was a kid growing up. And that is what I'm going to be duplicating. Now, if you're having trouble visualizing this, I suggest that you do exactly what I've done. Use two colors of yarn and really big needles and keep that as a guideline, because I'm going to want to duplicate the path of one row of stitches, which is why I did just one row of orange. Now I'm going to weave in this yarn tail. And when we're weaving in a yarn tail, remember the things that are most important are that it doesn't show through on the right side, it will stretch the same as the piece, and that it doesn't pull free. Now, to do a true duplicate stitch, I would just be going completely under those stitches. But the problem with that is that they're probably going to show through. And to guarantee that I keep my tail on the wrong side of the work, I'm going to duplicate stitch, but I'm going to kind of split those two stitches there. And don't worry, that is not going to harm the fabric, since it's not a split stitch just sitting off by itself. I've never had a problem with this. Now the next place I'm going to go is down here. I would not duplicate stitch into the cast on edge. That just gets kind of, I don't know, just not a good idea. Go up a row, or I could even go up 2 rows and it wouldn't be a problem. Now how long should I duplicate stitch? Well, at least an inch or so. It depends on the yarn you're using. If my gauge is 11 stitches per inch, well, maybe 11 stitches. If it's something like this, 1 inch might be 3 stitches. Probably would want to do a bit more. You just want to guarantee that it's not going to pull free. I'm only going to do a small amount so that you can see I'd probably do another stitch in real life. And you can see that those stitches are lying completely on top of the stitches in the back. And they are not, of course in this case they were going to be a little visible because I'm using such big old needles, but the piece will stretch and you're not even going to know that those things are there. Now when you use this, you want to trim your tail close. I'd probably trim it about there. Now another way to see this is to use this is when I've got to join 2 colors, or even if I want to start a new skein of yarn in the middle, which is never a great idea. It's going to save you work if you do that at the edge, because then you can weave it into a seam. But if it's something where you've got a special edge stitch going, say for a scarf, this might be your only option. Well, the first thing to do is I've got my join there, and the goal in this case is that I can't tell that I have joined a new stitch. So what I want to do is I'm going to take one side and I'm going to take it over to the direction that yarn would be going if I hadn't cut it, and do the same here. So I've got one little tiny cross at the bottom. I'm not going to wrap it, I'm not going to tie a knot, because that's just going to make it noticeable on the right side. And what I'm going to do is thread up and then duplicate stitch on the same row. In this case, probably a better idea if you duplicate stitch on the same row. And I'm only going to do 1 stitch of each because I don't want this video to be, well, to a million hours long. Go up here, and there I've got it duplicate stitched in. Now in real life I would do that much longer. thread this one up and do the same thing. I'm going to go in here, slightly split, and slightly split, and I would have a duplicate stitch line on the back. Now what you would see if you weren't doing such, big needles, is that this would be virtually invisible on the front. And what I'm going to do, and that the stitches lie right next to each other, what I'm going to do in the blog is I'll have an example of this with much smaller needles. But again, what I can recommend to you is if you're having difficulty seeing the path of the yarn, get really big needles and do a stripe in a different color, and that should help you see how that the path of the yarn on that one row.